Wow, that was never there before. Holy cow. Okay. All right, so we are recording. Ready to get going? All right, we will get rolling and we're recording. So, hold on, let me move that up there. There. Hi, all. How you doing? All right, so today I want to talk about buyer agency. We'll talk about the buyer agency document itself, the CIS, dive a little bit into procuring buyers because there really is a misconception about all this and what buyer agency is, what the purpose is, why we need to have that form, and what the reality of it really is. So, and I've been doing this for a long time and kind of teaching this for a long time, and there's still a lot of things that people don't know or don't actually think about. And it's stuff that we all really need to think about. So the first thing, guys, is the CIS. Can you, Cindy, Chris, can you see the, you can see the CIS? Okay. So when we talk about agency relationships, right? And hold up your fingers. How many agency relationships are there in the state of New Jersey? So you have seller's agent, right? You have buyer's agent, okay? You got dual agent. You have transaction broker. Those are four. So Cynthia, those are four right there. You held up your four fingers. Those are four right there. But what people don't sit there and think about is this one right here. It's sub-agency. Okay. People don't think about sub-agency, and it's in the CIS, and it's incredibly important that people need to understand exactly what sub-agency is and what the implications of that is. Okay. Excuse me. So talking about sub-agencies, the CIS, you're all familiar with the CIS, and anyone who watches this after the fact, you need to be familiar with the CIS. But when you look at the first part up here, so in addition, other brokerage firms, and we're talking about seller's agency, in addition, other brokerage firms may accept an offer to work with the listing broker's firm as the seller's agents. In such cases, those firms and all persons licensed with such firms are called sub-agents. So that is, there is a listing at XYZ brokerage, and you have the buyer, you're working with a buyer. If you do not have a buyer agency contract signed, you are acting as a sub-agent to the seller. Excuse me. Okay. So if you don't have that buyer agency contract signed, you actually legally represent the seller as a sub-agent to the seller because you don't have that contractual obligation with the buyer. That's going to play, and I'll talk more about what the implications of that really is. Okay. Make sense? All right. So as the buyer's agent, I'm gonna go over the pieces that I have highlighted here. Buyer's agent works only for the buyer. You have fiduciary duties to the buyer, which include reasonable care. I don't know if anyone remembers this from real estate school. They call it old car. No?
Never learned that.
Never learned that?
No.
All right. So reasonable care, undivided loyalty, confidentiality, and full disclosure. However, in dealing with sellers, a buyer's agent must act honestly. In dealing with both parties as a dual agent, a buyer's agent may not make any misrepresentations on matters material to the transaction, such as the buyer's financial ability to pay, must disclose defects of a material nature affecting the physical condition of the property, which a reasonable inspection by the licensee would disclose. So when you think about that, as far as buyer's agency, our loyalty and our duty is to the buyer. We represent them. We have to treat the other party honestly and fair. We can't disclose pertinent and private information to the other party when we're acting as a buyer's agent or dual agent. But as a sub-agent, if you don't have that buyer contract signed, your legal representation really lies with the seller. Even though you don't know the seller, you don't have a relationship with the seller, you have the relationship with the buyer. But because that buyer agency contract is not signed, you represent the seller. And guys, if you have any questions going through this, you can take yourself off mute. Okay, take yourself off mute and just fire away the question. No big deal. All right. So any questions on these two pieces that I covered here? Good. Okay.
So say you didn't get the buyer's agent paper signed. Say you just didn't do that. You're really working with the seller?
Right.
Oh,
Silly, isn't it?
yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't.
And
Okay.
I'll get into in a little bit why it's so important to have the buyer agency contract signed, because some people subscribe to certain philosophy that, look, buyer agency contracts are stupid. I think buyer agency is dumb. If I want to work with someone, I can work with them. If I don't want to work with them, I don't want to work with them. We can part ways, we can move on. Some people think that just because you have a buyer agency contract signed that you're getting paid no matter what, and that's not all how it works. There's so much more that goes into it. That's not how it works, okay? So I wanted to touch briefly on sub-agency, and I'll touch more on it as we're moving forward, but any questions on that piece right now? Okay. All right. Hi, Cindy. How you doing? Cynthia Becker. It's another Cynthia that's in here. All right. Next one. So let's cover the buyer agency contract. All right. So, going back to the CIS, by the way, guys, when is this supposed to be signed? When is it supposed to be presented and signed?
When you meet the client.
When you meet with them, where you're taking them out, this is supposed to be your disclosure of the relationships that you're talking about, their motivation about buying or selling. Okay. And it's important to have that done and notate at least that you've sent that out, that you have sent that. That's okay, Cynthia. It's okay. You're being late. It's being recorded that you've sent it out. Okay. And I'll share a situation about why that was important as well. Okay. So thank you for that. All right. Moving on to buyer agency. All right. Here's your buyer agency contract. Because it's, I definitely require this to be signed with every buyer that you're working with, okay? Because it covers you and it covers the brokerage legally, having this document signed by your buyer, okay? And I'll talk about how to present it to them so you can get it signed every single time. Even though it's a contract, people get intimidated sometimes by it, but you still got to get it signed. In order for it to be a contract, you have to have parties to the contract. So you'll list the buyer's name in here, areas that they're looking to buy. This one right here is so imperative that you ask them this question prior to working with them. Do they have a relationship with another broker? Okay. If they do have a relationship with another broker, sometimes you'll meet people at an open house. If they do have a relationship with another broker, but they want to work with you, you need to make sure that relationship is terminated with the other broker. And that can be done simply by the buyer sending a written notice to their agent that they're terminating their buyer agency relationship. Because when you have them sign this, you're going to check off no, because it should not get to the point where they do have another brokerage relationship and you check off yes. So it should always be no, checked off no on this one, that they do not have another legal relationship with another brokerage. Okay. Have to ask them that question. Meet people at open house, online lead may come in. That question has to be asked 100% of the time. Always got to ask. Okay. Next part, paragraph 3, declaration of business relationship, is what that relationship is going to be. Now, every time I've ever done this, I've always checked off buyer's agent and disclosed dual agent if that opportunity ever arises. And I explained to them what dual agency is, and that dual agency, again, that lies with the brokerage. So whether if it's your listing or not, if it's a listing that falls under the brokerage and you take your buyer into that property, you are now a dual agent because the agency relationship is with the brokerage and not specifically you itself. So you got to have, I'm always telling them that, look, if you flag and act as a dual agent, I can take you in to see any listing that is listed by Prime. If they don't agree to that, you cannot take them into a listing that is listed by any Prime agent company-wide. Okay. So be a dual agent. That's dual agency. But you have to check off what the relationship is going to be here. Now, this part here, this is where it's crucial, the term. There has to be a start date and a stop date. Okay. Any contract and compensation, which is here, which I'll get to in a second. So you have to have an end date to the agreement. I've seen sometimes they put in here 12 months. Guys, I'm not putting 12 months into a buyer agency contract. I think the buyer, you'll scare the buyer off if you put 12 months in there. I will put something in here as far as the date. I can put, depending on the relationship, depending on the conversation, I may just start out with 2 weeks. That we will have a buyer agency agreement with 2 weeks, because if you're talking to a buyer and they're sitting there saying, God, I'm not going to sign a contract. No. Well, this is a loyalty contract. This means that we're going to work together. And if you're not going to give me your loyalty, I don't really want to be spending my time driving around looking at houses for you, taking you all over South Jersey, if you're not going to give loyalty to me. This is a loyalty contract. This is a marriage contract. We're going to work together. And if after 2 weeks it doesn't work out, cool, we're all done. Everybody moves on. Bonuto, we go. Okay. So you have to play out the relationship to see how the relationship's going with the client as far as the term. But almost like a listing contract, you can put 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months in here. Okay. And when it's going to expire. So as far as a start date on the buyer agency contract, and then an end date when it will end. Here's what's so important. Or 3 days after receipt by buyer's agent of a written termination notice from the buyer, whichever shall first occur. So when you're talking to a buyer and they get intimidated by this contract, it's guys, we need to have this contract, and I'll explain why in a second we have to have it. But if you're not happy with the services, all you have to do is send me a written notification that you want it to be terminated, and it's done. Okay. They can send you an email, they can send you a letter, and yes, they can send you a text message. If they send you a text message notifying you that they want to terminate this relationship, that suffices, and that will constitute the beginning of those 3 days to cancel that the buyer agency contract. Does that make sense? Any questions on that part, guys? No? Okay. So the brokerage fee is what throws people. Okay. So there's got to be some kind of compensation into the contract. Same way you have a listing contract for sale consideration. We talk about the brokerage fee. Look, I get it that there's commissions that are being offered all over the place. Sorry, guys, I got something in my eye. When there's compensation being all over the place, anywhere from $1, which we've seen, up to 3%. And for anyone that watches this on the public YouTube channel, commissions are not set by law and can be negotiated. Okay. All right. So when you talk about the brokerage commission, guys, what I do is I'm always putting in here 2 to 3%, and I put that range. So I will plug in 2 to 3% on that. I'll take 3%, I'll take 2.5%, I'll take 2. Anything less than 2, I'm going to have that conversation with the buyer that if someone's offering 1%, okay, great, but they're going to have to make up that percentage of it. I don't like to go after the buyers for a commission and say, well, I'm 3%, and if I'm being offered 2.5, you have to pay half a point. Because guys, there's 3,500 other agents out there that won't do that. I think it's bad karma. I think it's bad form. And when you do that, you're thinking about the check now rather than the lifelong value of the client that you're working with. The growth of your business is based on the lifelong value of the client. Now, are you going to sit there and get 3 on all, 2.5 on all? No, sometimes it may be less, but you got to understand the average that's coming out, you'll be around 2.75, maybe 2.8. Further north that you get in Jersey, going to come down. Okay. They average more up closer to around 5% up there. And I know sometimes we're seeing 5% commission, 5% listings with 3% going to the listing agent, 2% going to the buyer's agent. Guys, get a happy client and move on. Okay. But when I talk to them and explain this to them, buyer agrees to pay to buyer's agent a brokerage fee of 2 to 3%. They start to freak out. You have to carry on further and keep on going smooth and tell them, calm down, relax, don't have a panic attack, because you got to understand it'll be earned, due, and payable. I have a buyer, you're getting paid at closing. But what they have to understand here too is that when you continue further on in this, however, if the seller of such property authorizes the listing broker to pay a portion of listing broker's brokerage fee to the buyer's agent, that portion of such brokerage fee shall be credited against what the buyer's commitment is. So if it's 2 to 3% there and I'm getting 2.5%, Mr. Buyer, you don't owe me anything. Okay, I'm getting paid from the seller. How much longer that will continue in our industry, I have no idea, because of the class action lawsuit that's going on and making headway. I'm not really sure, but for now, that is how it is. So they need to understand that. But what you don't want to explain to them is you don't want to tell them, hey, I work for free. No, don't tell them. And I hear people say that all the time. No, guys, I work for free for you. No, you don't. You don't work for free to them. You work your butt off. You spend a lot of your time. You spend gas, mileage, running around, opening up doors, sending them properties, reviewing properties, analyzing properties, setting up appointments, taking your weekends, taking your nights. Last time I checked, that wasn't free. That Mr. Buyer, you have to say, I don't work for free. However, the benefit to you is that I typically get compensated from the seller and not by you. But I certainly don't work for free. Because if you tell them that you work for free, they're going to believe you. Because we take for granted the fact that we feel that buyers know how we get paid. I always let my buyer know how I get paid. You cannot be afraid to talk about how you get paid. You can't be afraid to talk about money. And I let them know how I get paid. I get paid when you buy a house through me. If you buy a house through someone else, I don't get paid. And you go into deeper conversations with new construction, with open houses, clicking links online and going to other agents. So you have to be very clear to them about how it is you get paid. Because no, not all of them know. And there are still people that think that you get paid hourly or you get paid a salary to drive them around. Okay. So understand that. And look, I'm not telling you have to put in 2 to 3%. I'm just telling you that if you put in 3% and 2.5 is being offered, then that might freak out the buyer and you might lose an opportunity. Okay. All right, come down here. The other highlighted part, buyer's duty. Buyer shall, and this is where I'm explaining all this to the buyer. Buyer shall provide accurate and relevant personal information to buyer's agent regarding buyer's financial ability to purchase real estate. I want to know their financial situation. I want to know that. If I'm talking to them and they're putting down 20% and they're buying a $400,000 house, okay, well, they need to have 80 grand plus closing costs. So, Mr. Buyer, where is your $80,000? I want to know where it is. Well, it's none of your business. Well, it really is, because if I'm helping you do this, it is my business where that is. Because I need to understand, is that 80 grand, is it under your mattress? Is it under the bed? Is it in an investment account? Is it in a retirement account? Because if you're factoring that 80 grand and it comes from specific accounts, the lender will not look at that and give you credit for the full $80,000. So there's a lot of variables that go behind that. You need to understand where that comes from. So have the conversation with them where their capital is. I don't need bank account numbers. You don't have to tell me specifically what bank that it's in, but I need to understand that it's somewhere that's accessible, it's liquid, and you can tap into it quick. Okay. Any questions on that? Good. All right. Next piece. Mr. Buyer, you're going to advise me of any home offered for sale to you where you may have an interest in purchasing such property. So if you find something out there, let me know. Don't go contacting the listing agents. Don't go contacting for sale by owners. I will handle all that for you. That's part of my job. That's what I get compensated for. So please let me know anything that you see that's out there. If you're going into an open house on a weekend, great. Here's a stack of my business cards. Take these with you. Drop my business card there. If you're at a new construction development, don't go into the sales office without me. Call me. When you're standing outside of the sales office, I will contact that sales associate and let them know. That way I can be there to help you out. You have to explain to them, but let them know anything that you see that you like. I'm your first contact. I'm your point of contact. And do me a favor, when you call me, wait more than 30 seconds for me to give you a call back before you go ahead and call someone else. Okay. I might be doing something else at that time. So give me a little more than 30 seconds. Okay. And here, submit through buyer's agent any offer to purchase or contract on a property which was shown to buyer by buyer's agent. So any property that I'm showing you, your offer is going to go through me. This leads to the procuring cause issue that we deal with, and we're dealing with a lot now. Okay. Any offer you submit that on a property, have the offer come through me. I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. I'll take you all the way through. Okay. You have to educate them on that process. Do not take for granted the fact that we think they know what it is that's going on. Okay. Make sense? Okay. Other buyers here, other potential buyers may be interested in the same properties as buyer. It's agreed that buyer's agent may represent such other potential buyers, whether such representation arises prior to, during, or after the termination of this agreement. And any other situation, buyer agrees that buyer's agent will not disclose to any other buyer. Basically, as that I can work with other buyers, I can show other buyers these properties. I cannot disclose that information and any information to you or to the other party. Was that? Okay. Sorry. So you have to explain to them that you do work with other people. Guys, I cannot live alone and working with you. I have to pay my bill, so I need other buyers I have to work with. Okay, and some of those people may be interested in the same house that you're interested in, but understand that your information is going to be kept private to me, and so will theirs. Okay, dual agency, we went over that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Right here, buyer acknowledges receipt of a consumer information statement on New Jersey real estate relationships. So incredibly important. They need to get the CIS. Okay, and the last part, buyer understands it's a legal binding agreement. This is a legal contract. This is not a napkin that you're writing something on. This is a legal binding contract that binds the buyer to working with you for all of these purposes, or the stipulations laid out in this entire agreement. Okay. Make sense? Any questions on any of these things that I've covered so far before I dig in a little bit deeper? Okay. So here's why I want to talk about the buyer agency and why it is so incredibly important to have. The industry it's been batshit crazy the last few years. People coming out of the woodwork, getting licensed, training, education, some of these agents has not been good, and it's been the wild, wild west. There are more procuring cause cases going on now than ever before with our board of realtors. I know that for a fact. There are certainly more going on now than there ever has been before. there's going to be lawsuits and more lawsuits and litigation that comes up from things of the market the last few years. And you have to make sure that your paperwork is ironclad, it's tight, and you have it all. Okay. This buyer agency contract, when I explain it to the buyer, that Cynthia, if you're my buyer, I'm going to have a conversation with you. This buyer agency contract, this is our legal representation, that I legally represent you. Cynthia, we're going to go around, we're going to look at other houses. You're going to show me properties that you want to go check out and take a look at. And that's awesome. We're going to go in, we're going to put offers in, negotiate offers. Now, in order for me to do that, to have your interest, your best interest at heart, we need to have this buyer agency contract signed. That means that myself and my brokerage represent you. If we don't, I can still do those same things for you, drive you around, show you houses, negotiate. However, rather than negotiate on your behalf, I'm going to be doing it on the seller's behalf. Because if we don't have this agreement signed, I will be acting as a sub-agent to the seller. So my sub-agency lies with the seller, so I'll be negotiating against you. And do you want that to happen? No. So do me a favor, go ahead and sign this buyer agency contract here that stipulates exactly what our agency relationship is, so I can work with your best interest at heart. And that's what that is. It means that I can legally do everything. My legal relationship and representation lies with you and not as a sub-agent to the seller. So I'm talking to buyers, guys, if you want me to represent you, negotiate for you, not against you, we sign the buyer agency contract. And if it doesn't work out, if you don't like me and I don't like you, then the only thing that has to happen is that you just need to send written notice that the agreement is done, or I send you written notice that the agreement's done, and everyone moves on. But this piece of paper here allows me to represent you. Okay. Because here's what's going to happen. Here's what could happen. Let's just say you work with a buyer and deal goes south, goes to court. You're in litigation, goes to attorneys. They're going to ask for every piece of documentation pertaining to the transaction. This agreement, this buyer agency agreement, is one of those pieces of paper. Okay. If you are acting as a buyer's agent, but do not have the buyer agency contract signed, the other side, if it's the plaintiff or the judge, they're going to come to you and say, Christina, can you please tell me why you do not have a buyer agency contract signed? Well, I just didn't get one signed. Okay, so then if that's the case, why are you going and working against the seller when you should be working on behalf of the seller? How's that going to go for you in court? It ain't going to go well. It's not going to go well. And I'm telling you that I've seen these cases, and this will be asked. If you do not have a buyer agency contract signed, your representation should be with the seller. And the question is going to be, why are you going against the seller? Because you should be going for the seller. This form covers your butt. Okay. This form protects you, that if something happens to the transaction and you're in litigation 2 years down the road, that your legal representation is with the buyer and the person that you work with. That's what this is. Okay. That's the whole key to it. Again, that's the marriage piece of this contract. We're going to work together and I represent you, because if not, it could go bad. Everything that we do is trying to understand and make sure that we are being protected. Guys, any questions on that as far as the understanding about why we have to have that? Have you always gotten this form 100% of the time? Cynthia, where you were at before, or Christina, where you were at before? Were you required to get this 100% of the time?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
What's that?
Oh, I said nope.
No,
No.
And it's a shame. I've seen it a whole lot. I've seen people just rip up the agreements in front of people. And like I said, I'm okay with ripping it up and letting people move on. I've let people out of buyer agency contracts and that's totally cool. But if I don't have this, I'm not protecting myself or the brokerage. You got to have this to protect yourself and the brokerage. Okay. You always, again, you play the what if game. What if something happens this deal, it goes south and there's a lawsuit 2 years down the road? If I don't have this, it's not going to go well. You need to have the documentation. You need to have it all there. Okay. Have you ever had any issues getting it signed?
No.
I've had people who said they didn't want to sign.
They give you a reason why they didn't want to sign it?
I guess they just didn't really understand it, and I guess I didn't explain it fully, like you just said.
Okay. No, I
It made
get
it sound a lot not as bad.
I appreciate you saying that. I do. I appreciate the honesty on that, Cynthia. Thank you very much. And I get it because it's certainly been there. Like when you're presenting a contract to a person, especially someone that you don't really have a relationship with, or you're just building a relationship, it's tough to do that. Now, I'm not necessarily throwing this buyer agency contract in their face the first day I met them. CIS needs to be presented. Now, guys, I'm going to say this with the CIS. I've been to three procuring cause hearings in the last 6-7 months. I was at 0 in the first 19 years, my first 19 and a half years in the business. And the conversation I had with the woman of the board is that in a 5-year time period, they had maybe 12 procuring cause cases. They are at 32 in the last 12 months. Okay. So it's definitely getting a little nutso. And it always comes up about the CIS. Did you present it? When did you get it signed? And a question that also was asked, sometimes we can send it to someone or you can say, I handed it to them when I met them. This came up in a question and this had a bearing on the outcome of it, is that the question was, okay, where do you have it noted that you handed the CIS to them? What do you mean, where do you have it noted? So you want me to write down on a piece of paper that I gave it to them? They didn't sign it, but I gave it to them. Yes. If you hand it over to someone, notate somewhere on a piece of paper, somewhere in your phone, 4/12/23, 1:30 p.m. gave CIS to Mr. Buyer. Because if something happens down the road, you need to have that chain of events as far as what took place showing that you did that. Blew my mind when I heard that. That was a little crazy, but it is what it is. So sometimes if people don't want to sign that because they think it's a contract too, it's a disclosure piece, and it says on there that it's not a contract, still need to present it to them. Okay. And if they're not signing it, just make some kind of notation somewhere when you present it to them, so you have a record of when it was presented to them. Okay. So here's one thing. I'm going to tie this into procuring costs as well, because everyone, I don't care, sorry. A lot of people think that because you have a buyer agency contract signed, you're getting paid. If your buyer buys a house with another agent, that you are owed a commission by the other brokers. That's not the case, guys. That's not how it works. This is on a CE class that I did, and this really stood out to me. This is a picture, CE class I'm doing on the residential contract, and this is definitions of things. Okay, procuring cause. 1, the effort that brings about the desired result. So what's the desired result of your buyer? Buying a property, right? That desired result is to buy a property. If your buyer buys a property and it's not with you, you're not necessarily the procuring cause of the sale of that property. Just because you even showed that property to the buyer, but then they bought it with someone else, does not mean you are the procuring cause of the sale of that property, because you did not bring about the desired result. The other part, an unbroken chain of events that results in the sale of a property. So just because you showed that property to a buyer didn't necessarily consummate the sale and bring the sale about, which resulted in the settlement of the property. So don't think you're procuring cause just because you sent them an email of the property through the MLS, you set up a showing for the property, or you showed them a property. Or even if you put an offer in on the property, if you put an offer in on the property, it didn't get accepted, another agent gets it accepted, gets through inspections, closing, and it's a done deal. That doesn't mean that you're the procuring cause of the sale of the property. So what's one of the questions that people always sit there and ask? Well, they bought the property. Well, did you have a buyer agency contract? The buyer agency contract has nothing to do with the other brokerage at all. So Chrissy, if you're working with a buyer and you have a buyer agency contract signed, and that buyer goes and purchases a property through another agent, people ask, well, do you have a buyer agency contract? Well, then I'm the procuring cause of the sale. The other agency should pay me commission. No, the buyer agency contract is between you and Prime and the buyer, nothing to do with the other brokerage. Okay, that's not it at all. So procuring cause and the buyer agency are two totally separate things. With the procuring cause, that is who brought about the sale of the property and finalized that desired result, which is getting the property closed. So just because you have a buyer agency contract doesn't mean you're getting paid. Okay. Now, with the buyer agency contract, if the buyer buys a property with another agent and you had a buyer agency contract signed, then yes, the buyer could be due a commission because of that buyer agency contract. because it does stipulate that the buyer is going to pay a commission to the brokerage. Let me ask you this. If the commission on that property is, say, $10,000, and this is brokerage wide, this is not just specific to front, understanding this. If the buyer purchases property and commissions $10,000, right? And then someone's on a 70-30 split, $3,000 goes to the brokerage. What brokerage is going to go spend $10,000 to sue a buyer to take home $3,000? Even if you're at 100%. Now, there's no brokerage that's going to sit there and go sue the buyer to take home a couple $1,000, but it's going to cost $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to go sue the buyer and attorneys, because that has nothing to do with E&O. The buyer agency agreement's not going to sit there and factor in E&O, and then we use the insurance company to go sue the buyer to collect money. It's not going to happen. And guys, I've managed larger brokerages, and that is the mentality brokerage wide. It's not going to go and spend 10 grand to bring home $2,000. Okay. The only time I've ever heard of that actually happening, the commission was like $40,000, $35,000, $40,000. Then it made sense to sit there and go spend the 5 or 10 grand to collect money. Okay. But that's what you need to understand as far as the difference. The buyer agency does not mean it's about procuring costs. They're two totally separate things. Does that make sense? And do you have questions on that, guys? No? Okay. So this is the reason why when you look at the document checklist in Loop, that in there, the buyer agency contract is required, because we have to play the what if game, and it will protect you at the end of the day. It will protect you having that buyer agency contract signed if something goes wrong. And we have to play the what if game with all the documents that we require and the state requires. It's to make sure you're covering your butt. Okay. You have to have the perfect picture and the perfect roadmap put together at the end of the day. If you wind up in litigation, that you can hand that over to the attorney, they look at it and be like, great, we're good, no problem. As opposed to, okay, we're missing a whole lot here and we're in trouble. Does that make sense? And I get the fact that most times the buyer agency contract doesn't get signed until you're getting the agreement of sale signed, where you email that and the contract to the buyer at the same time. Okay. Is that how it's supposed to happen? Not necessarily. But the reality is, does it happen that way? Yes, it happens that way. I get it. You got to get it signed. Okay. And again, when I present it to people, it's, guys, if you have a question about it, look, I represent you. I mean, and it allows me to represent you fully by signing this. Give me 2 weeks. Because honestly, that's what I did when I first got in the business. I knew nothing about, I didn't know anything from anything. And I wanted everyone to sign it. And I was taught everyone signed the buyer agency contract. So I asked people for 2 weeks. If it works out well, we'll extend it. And if it doesn't, then we part ways and go find someone else. And that's cool. And that's how we used to get them signed. So if you have someone that may be combating you about signing the agreement, just ask them and explain to them really what it's for. You want me negotiating for you or against you? Okay, for you? Awesome. We got to sign this. This allows me to do it. Give me 2 weeks if you have hesitation on it, and we'll see how it works out. And if it's good, we'll extend. And that's it. And it was very simple. And when you sit there and understand the conversation and how to have it, it becomes fluid and there's no hesitation in it. And when you don't have hesitation in your voice or in your pitch or in your discussion or anything that you're explaining to them, when there's no hesitation there, people just go along with you. Okay. That's part of the sales skills and part of the sales process, right? Chris, when you bartend, someone orders martini, you just throw in there, Kettle One or Sky or whatever it is. Like, you want that, right? Yeah, great. Maybe another 4 or 5 hours of martini, but we're just going with it. Yes, you do. Don't you lie. You should.
I always ask them what their preference is. Do
I
they
understand.
prefer?
I know. Well, my preference, friend, with the buyer's agency contract to sign it.
Okay, good. Good.
All right. So, guys, I pretty much went through everything that I wanted to cover today, and really make sure everyone understands how the buyer agency and procuring cause really are not that interlinked as far as what the outcome is and people getting paid, because agents have a misconception that if you have a buyer agency contract signed, you're getting paid. Not necessarily the case. That's not what it's for. That's not what it's about. The buyer agency contract solidifies the representation that you and the brokerage have with the buyer, helps protect you, helps protect the buyer's best interest as well, the client that you're working with. Okay, so we definitely want to get that signed. If there's ever any questions on how to get it signed, when to get it signed, what's the best direction to get the buyer to agree to it, then give me a call and let me know. I'm happy to help out, happy to have a conversation with you and the buyer if we need to jump on a call or anything. Okay. Guys, does anyone here have any questions on any of this piece or anything about buyer agency, procuring cause at all? All good? Cynthia Becker, I can't see your face. I don't know if you're shaking your head no or yes.
I'm good.
All right, awesome. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for being on today. I appreciate you taking the time. Again, procuring cause is a tricky thing, and it's becoming more popular today because of how the market has become and how leads come in and how buyers contact agents and how some agents just don't put the time into understanding the craft and the business and the care that you have to give your client. So we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we have to do to keep ourselves out of procuring cause, to make sure that all documents are getting signed, to make sure that you're protected, the agency is protected, and we are taking care of the clients first and foremost. Okay, so I will take the recording of this. I'll put it on the Facebook group as well. If anyone has any questions with it, just give me a shout and just let me know. Look at Cynthia sitting outside. Good for you. It's a beautiful day.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Everyone have a great rest of the day. All right, I'll see y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.